Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Southern Reads podcast, the show where I talk about books and only books and everything book related. And today I am joined by Mr. John Zachary. John is an author and former engineering and data analyst professional whose work sits at the intersection of science, history, and philosophical inquiry. He applies principles of mathematics, reliability, engineering, and astronomical modeling to explore standing questions about client timelines and historical events. Today, we'll explore his core framework, his research process, and what it means when data, time, and belief intersect in unexpected ways. He's also going to share with us a little bit more about the books that he has come out with that focus on Christian science and everything similar to that. So I'm really looking forward to having John come on the podcast today. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast and welcome to Southern Reads.
Well, thank you, Noah. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So share with me a little bit about the background that you do and kind of share a little bit about what led you to want to write about it and have everyone and kind of publish this theory to everyone else.
Okay, so my key thing, kind of like a natural at math. I like math. When I was a kid, I read encyclopedias, reading a lot, and then read the Bible. Grew up in a Christian home. And I would say like 10 to 12 years old, born again. So I come from that perspective. And what I do is I do science, religion interface studies based on finding patterns. And it began with a curiosity. Uh, and the curiosity is this. If I can scientifically date the only time-based prophecy in the Old Testament, it foretells of future events that occur on a precise date, what will we learn? And when you get that done, you learn a lot. It's kind of like you go, wow. And so the scientific dates, so they're recorded in Daniel chapter 9. It foretells of a decree to rebuild Jerusalem. It actually took me 30 years to find the scientific date, but it's very credible. And then the other event is the destruction of Herod's temple. And before that is the coming of the Messiah. After the Messiah comes, he dies as a sacrificial offering, which you could read in verse 24 of chapter 9 of Daniel. He rises from the dead and he destroys Herod's temple. That's in the prophecy. Why would he do that? Because Jesus, his sacrificial death and supernatural resurrection replaced the Old Testament sacrificial system. That's why the destruction of Herod's temple is in the prophecy. But what turns out to be really interesting is that it's a time-based matrix. When you do all the scientific dating, what you do is you put limits on the beginning and the end in ancient history. How does that all fit together? And what you learn is really fascinating. And people who read the book only give it 5 stars. It's totally unique, and there isn't a book like it on the planet. But it is science, religion. We use astronomy. Actually, we use Babylonian ancient astronomers. They would observe lunar eclipses or solar, record when they happened and the year of this king. One king everybody pretty much probably familiar with Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and he has a few pages in this 400-page book on lunar eclipses during that period. And so you were able to actually scientifically date when Solomon's temple burned down, things like that. So it makes for a fascinating study.
So during this framework and writing process, what was some things that you learned about science and this kind of theory that were really surprising for you to hear and read?
Well, what I learned was like the Babylonian astronomers would observe a lunar eclipse, but so they didn't have clocks or watches, and it would be in the evening or at night, and they stayed up all night watching the skies. Uh, so they would say, we saw or observed a total eclipse. It could be a partial eclipse. It would tell you it started just after the sun went down or it was at midnight, or it went down with the sun, things like that. Then you get NASA scientific data, and you get within 1 hour of that event. The scientists at NASA says or wrote that you are going to be within 1 hour of that event, even though it happened millennia ago. So it gives you very good data to analyze the Bible. And then to get the exact date, there's a lot of unique things about it. One thing is there's a control sequence. This is the most surprising thing that keeps repeating. Now, we discovered it in Daniel's time-oriented prophecy. So it tells you from the issuing of a decree, then you count from that day forward a certain amount of time, which you do using a constant from the book of Revelation. And what it does, it divides and shows that Herod's temple was destroyed on the 14,000th day in this time-based matrix. And that's kind of interesting. Why 14,000, that exact number? Well, that's just the beginning. So you have to use this number from Revelation chapter 11, verses 2 and 3, the 360-day constant. And when you do that, you always get 14,000 days. Now, I did this and I had it all figured out by 1986. And by that time, I only knew two of these 14,000 day sequences, the one hidden in Daniel's prophecy and one in the 21st century, based on a prophecy of Jesus. So I only knew of two. As we went deeper and deeper after the year 2000, use the same number, 360. You apply it to the oldest books in the Bible, and you find a 14,000 day sequence actually began with Moses and Joshua. The 14,000th day turns out to be the day they crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. So every time that's consistent, you use 360, you get exactly 14,000 days. Now, the 14,000 days in the Old Testament, and as you can read it in Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, it tells you and documents the very first day the Ark of the Covenant moved. So you're watching the movement of the Ark of the Covenant, and it crosses the Jordan River on the 14,000th day. So if you read Numbers chapter 10, verse 11, it'll say, it began to move on the 20th day of the second month of the second year. Now, why would that even be put in there? Because it would seemingly be meaningless, everybody, until it became meaningful. And so if you change that date by even 1 day, you won't get 14,000. The same thing with the scientific dating of Daniel's prophetic events. If you changed either date from the scientific date, you're not going to find the same 14,000 days. So we actually end up finding that the 14,000 day control period began at the time of Moses and Joshua. It began again at the destruction of Solomon's temple. It's repeated with Herod's temple. They both are burned down on the 14,000th day. And then you find it in our time as well. There's just a lot of interesting facts of doing this research. Now, some people may think, well, if there are miracles in the Bible, you can't count that. And that would be true if you wanted to do it scientifically, but we're using the books of Nehemiah and Ezra. Those are just history books, no miracles in there. We're just looking at the time. The time turns out to be the control of human events. So it's showing intervention, divine intervention into human events to control the result, what's going to happen. And you might ask, well, how do I know scientifically that I foretold the future? The the oldest copy of Daniel using radiocarbon dating is now placed at 230 BC to 160. It foretells of Herod's temple being destroyed, which occurred in AD 70. So more than 2 centuries into the future to an exact date. And so those are just surprising things you learn from doing the research and reading the book, should you want to do that.
So a lot of your research for this kind of has been from what you've learned and read. Um, when it comes to religion, I know this is such a touchy subject for a lot of people. Were you nervous about bringing this to a lot of uh, politically, maybe politically incorrect people or people that were kind of different religions? Were you afraid of kind of some of the feedback that you would receive from that audience?
Well, I actually haven't. It's very rare to get a negative feedback because it's more like this is the scientific data, and I'm actually using NASA scientific data to do the analysis. And if people, they don't, I don't ever argue with anybody. If you want to argue, I'm not going to. Uh, I was on Reddit and an atheist guy saw what I wrote and he kind of got a little ticked and I wasn't going to say anything, but he kept pushing me. So I explained it to him and I never heard back from the guy. So I'm not there to get in your face and tell you this is the way it is. You can read the book, analyze it yourself, and make your own conclusions. So it's like this. It's actually a proof that there is a divine being and he's controlling human events. This is how you do it. So today is May the 20th. 600 years from now, it'll be the year 2626. Can you or anybody in your listening audience tell me what's going to happen on May 20 in the year 2626? Nobody can do it. It's impossible. So it leads actually to a way of finding out, does God actually exist? Because you have a problem that nobody can solve. That's just impossible. That problem is foretelling what will happen 600 years from now on that exact date. Nobody can do it. But when you do the scientific dating, it shows human events are being controlled. You get this repeating sequence of 14,000 days that happens over and over and over, and it's always 14,000. In other words, there's zero variation. It's a control system. And let's say I did the research and you found values of 10,922, and then you got 11,111. Then you got 13,925. If you had all that there, it would be meaningless. But it's exactly 14,000 day control periods, and it's covering 3,500 years from the time of Moses into the 21st century. The 21st century event was a prophecy from Jesus. He also said that Herod's temple would be destroyed, torn down. Then the Jewish people would be scattered around the world. Someday they will come back and retake control of Jerusalem again. So that's in the Gospel of Luke. And it's in Luke chapter 21. You have to read verse 7, which is the question. Luke wrote that only asks, when will the temple be destroyed? But Jesus went further and pulled it into the modern era. He said this: Jerusalem would be trampled underfoot by Gentile nations until the time of the Gentile people end. So in the Six-Day War, 1967, the Jewish people retook control of Jerusalem. Again, that's the sign. And it's not telling you Christ is coming, it just tells you, get ready, it's coming closer. So when you add 14,000 to that date, you come to the Feast of Trumpets in the year 2005. And that's another perfect alignment, 14,000 days. So it's kind of fascinating. But if people, don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I teach evangelism and I tell people this. If somebody's not interested, leave them alone. We don't want to argue. And one guy actually did in Malawi. I do mission work overseas. He got an SD card for his cell phone, but he didn't get trained to tell him, don't argue with anybody. And he was using it in this town. And then the we learned actually he had converted 80% of the Muslims in a mosque to the Christian faith. And they were going to church. They quit going to the mosque. And those 20% left, burned down his church. They burned down his house. They were trying to kill him. But we learned actually, because we had a sheikh in another city had converted. He knew the top Muslim in that nation. And that's how we learned. He called him that 80% of the people had left the mosque. So it was their choice based on logic and evidence, but we never argue. And that's the way it should be. You can do that. If you don't even want to read the book, that's fine. I wrote it as a calling on my life, and that's kind of how it happened. If people just want to argue, I want to argue. You can, look at it. I suggest you get the book, read it, redline it, and tell me what's wrong with it. So one thing, can we even have confidence? Is what I'm writing or telling you even valid? Here's the issue. So for the calculated date for the destruction of Herod's temple, because we're using lunar and solar eclipses in the Seleucid Empire, that began just after Alexander the Great. One of his general was named Seleucus. It's the Seleucid Empire. And so we have a lot of solar and lunar eclipses in that region. And you use that to calculate the destruction of Herod's temple. And our confidence level is extremely high. Now, normally, an engineer will use a 95% confidence level for data analysis. That means there's a 5% chance you're going to be misled by that data, whatever it is. But when you calculate this lunar and solar eclipse data, the confidence level is 10 to the power of 66. That means there's only one chance in 1,000 billion. You have to say billion 7 times that I was misled by the data. So it's very credible. And the same is true of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. It's 10 to the power of 52 because we're using scientific data to find these events when they occurred. So it's a fascinating. And the other thing is this, I don't want to argue, but what we're doing this for is to reveal the existence of God by a scientific method, because nobody can, and this is it. If you have a problem nobody can solve, but you can measure it where something did solve the problem, that's how you know.
Do you think that after people read this book that they'd have a better understanding and maybe it would stop with a lot of the political divisiveness of the country?
I believe it would, because what it's telling you is to love your neighbor. That's really the gospel story is a message of love and hope, living at peace with one another. It's not, I mean, some people in history have created animosity by how they share the gospel or something like that. There's no need to do that. Uh, and if you read and try to understand what is being said, you realize there's more to it than that. And it's also saying you have a soul, I have a soul, and we're going to live together forever. And we don't want to be arguing about things that are essentially in the long run not even worth arguing about.
What's been, have you been able to convince people to transition from maybe they didn't believe in religion and Christianity and all that, and has this book been able to kind of change some of their thinking and have actually kind of uh switched their perspective?
Well, it happens a lot because we do, I teach evangelism. I call it laid back, easy to use. And we ask people a question. I could be talking to you and I would say, oh, by the way, Noah, do you have any kind of spiritual beliefs? And I shut up. And if you don't answer, I'm done. All week, and I teach, you just say a prayer for that person, move on, because the Holy Spirit does that work, not us. Okay, let's say you spill your guts and you say, well, I'm a Muslim, a pagan, a witch, or whatever you are, your belief system, then I'm going to ask you if what you believed as a pagan or a Muslim, whatever, or an atheist is not true and I can prove it, would you want to know? And I shut up. And if you're not interested, we're done. But if you want to know, then we would show a video, and we have lots of videos, subsets of the book. I wrote the research, and the person watches that, and then they make a decision. Now they don't have to make a decision right there and then. They may think about it for several months, but we have actually more than 250,000 converts in African nations, and a lot of them are coming, they're coming out of Islam, paganism, witchcraft, things I've never heard of before, because it's all based on logic and science. It's a science religion interface study. And as I said, it's actually a proof because nobody can foretell the future so precisely. To do that, to foretell the future centuries ahead to an exact date, the source has to transcend space time. And so, one of the things, like in Islam, there are time oriented prophecies that foretell the future, but the 100% failure rate, none of them came true. So, what does that tell you about the source of Islamic prophecy? It means, and I've said this, how do you know that Allah even exists? And it begins by asking a question. Did Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, actually speak with Allah in the Quran? And the answer is no, he did not. And the Muslim theologians will tell you it's called absolute monotheism. That means Allah is well beyond, and he will not talk to a human. We're below that level. He won't talk to us. So Muhammad never talked to him. The story of the Quran, taught by Muslims, and it's in the Quran, is an angel named Gabriel, would get the message from Allah and deliver it to Muhammad. That's the Quran. So, is there any prophecy in the Quran that foretells the future centuries in advance? There's none. But in Hadith literature, this is other Islamic literature, there are time-oriented prophecies that should have happened when Muslims conquered Constantinople, but none of them came to pass. They all failed 100%. So, what does that mean? That means the source of these prophecies does not transcend space time. Now, if you decide, well, I'm going to believe it anyway, that's your choice. I'm not going to argue with you. It's your choice if you want to believe that. But if you want to make a logical, scientific based decision, you're going to consider it. That's for certain. And that's why we do get lots of converts and that they're actually happy. The requirement for living a Christian life is way less than a requirement to live an Islamic life.
What do you hope for the future with this book? And are you planning on writing any more books in the future about this topic, or maybe have it on a different aspect or do a different angle on it?
Well, I do. I have another book I wrote. On the future, basically, or what would love to see is people read it and find truth with it, and their lives are transformed. So I know a lot of people have issues, maybe it's the way they were raised or whatever, uh, or some people are mean. So there's no reason to be mean when you realize you're going to live forever anyway. Uh, and see people come to realize there is a spiritual life of spirituality. When you die, your soul is going to rise up out of your body. And I say that from more than just the science point of view. It's kind of like a spiritual experience I had. So I know you have a soul. Personally, I would say that just from that. But the science behind it does that. So, yeah, I would like to polish. Actually, we're going to start what I call affiliate marketing in the nation of Tanzania. They speak Swahili. 5 nations, 260 million people speak that. So we're going to start at a university with 40,000 students, and they just become members and they can make money. And you have Bible study questions. You can set up Bible studies and learn about this information. But yeah, I do have another book, and one of the things I would write about was what does it take to be able to tell the future so precisely? Again, it comes back, the being has to transcend the universe, space, time. Now, like time would be meaningless. So I'm talking with you, Noah, this day in 538 BC, over 2,500 years ago from now. God is speaking to Daniel just as I'm speaking to you now, because that's what it means to transcend space-time. And so that would mean that he would know everything about you, beginning to end, your entire life, everything.
So, for readers that are just reading the book for the first time and to new readers that find it, what's the overall takeaway and the main key that you want people to get when they read your book?
Well, they realize that there is a spiritual realm, and they would waken up to that and have their life transformed if that's what it needs. Or it's actually written for skeptics and believers, and there was no need to write it a different way. And if a person is a skeptic, that's fine. They can read it. If you read the reviews on Amazon, I think there's 38 right now. Amazon's deleted 25 of them. They're all 5 star because the research is off the beaten path. Nobody has done this before, to my knowledge. Uh, the uh, the information is credible, and so people can have their lives transformed. If you read, like, okay, one guy that's a Christian guy read the book. Amazon deleted his review. It was a 5 star, and he said this: I thought if you had to have faith, you had to lose your mind. Zachary shows the opposite. Actually, science validating faith. Instead of, most people think science and faith are in conflict. But this is a specific uh, application of science. We're using astronomy, simple math, and logic. That's it. And it's not difficult to read the book. Uh, you do some things may seem difficult. Maybe in Appendix L, I calculate what's the probability of the Romans burning down Herod's temple on that 14,000th day. And it's so far out there. You know, they basically were being controlled to that very day. They had to get everybody in place. Number one, the army, the military. They had to do it in the right year, the right month, just to align it. And then they fought. They had to go through all these issues. There were 24 major decisions just to get to that specific event. And the Romans didn't actually even want to burn it down, but it happened on that very date, like it was a controlled. I talk about some people are being controlled like a string puppet. You're on a puppet and you're like a puppet doing the work and you don't even know it. So I think that goes on a lot based on the research.
Well, John, I appreciate you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast today to share with my audience all about what you've learned and everything. If people are interested in learning more about the book, if they would like to check it out for themselves and would just like to follow you and stay connected with you about what you have going forward, where can they go to learn more information about the book as well as to kind of stay in contact with you?
Okay, yeah, I have a website actually. There's a newsletter, and we'll be using that for like the Tanzanian affiliate marketing, what's going on. So if you go to the website, and you can also buy the book at Amazon or go to a bookstore and order it. You have to just search for the name, The Science Behind the Story of Jesus by John Zachary. The website, though, is the triple W author, like a guy that writes books, authorjohnzachary.com. Zachary, I've learned you have to spell it for people, Zachary. Some people want to put a K in there, but there's no K. So authorjohnzachary.com, and there's some information there about the book. I also put some of the reviews that Amazon deleted. There are some really good reviews, and one guy wrote, I could tell I call this scientific apologetics because we use real science, and it solves a problem that nobody can solve, foretelling the future centuries ahead to the very day. That's what's unique about it. And then this repeating control periods, 14,000 over and over and over, zero variation. Also, it's a fact that both Solomon's temple and Herod's temple were destroyed on the same day, based on what's written on Jeremiah the prophet, who was an eyewitness, and Josephus. There's also a third temple, Ezekiel's temple. The 14,000th day for Ezekiel's temple is the same day that both Solomon and Herod's temples were burned down. So you see the way the Bible is written, and the chronology of the Bible shows human events are being controlled by a divine being to reveal what is true of the spiritual life. And he's doing that so you will have eternal life. And I believe this: there will be billions and billions of people in heaven based on Revelation. You can read chapter 7, start at verse 9 through 17, a number of people nobody could count. And it's also repeated in Revelation chapter 19. But yeah, go to search for it. The Science Behind the Story of Jesus by John Zachary. And you can read the reviews and decide if you want to read it. And I think you'll be glad you read it. And I'll see you in heaven.
And I will put all of this information in the description box and in the show notes as well, so that if you are interested in learning more about this and would like to follow up and read his book, all that information will be down there. Feel free to follow the podcast on the socials. You can reach out to me on Instagram and TikTok at southern.reads. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcasts. And feel free to check out the website, noahspodcast.com, to learn more about this show as well as all the other shows that I do. You'll find links to all the social links on there. Feel free to also subscribe and follow to the podcast so that you can get notified of when new episodes come out. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and I will catch you all in the next episode of Southern Reads.